Just take a look at the greenery here. All of this in early October. And in here we also have, well, right here, one of our yellow cauliflower. Take a look at this beauty. Guten Yardening, everybody. Well, it is an absolutely stunning fall day out here, and by stunning I mean it is overcast. It's exactly what you'd expect from a fall day. It's what makes fall my favorite time of year. Now last year I think we went from about 75 or 80 degrees Fahrenheit to near freezing in the span of a couple of minutes, or at least that's what it felt like. But this year we have been really fortunate to have some mild temperatures. We really haven't had any really cold temperatures, and that means that some of our summer vegetables are still producing and a lot of our fall crops are just now taking off. And so today I'm going to take you on a little tour of what's growing here early October in Zone 5, Wisconsin, and what we hope to harvest here in the near future. So this is not a harvest tour. This is just a simple tour to show you exactly what's going on here at Guten Yardening. Now, most of the videos this season where we've done any kind of tour have been focused more on the harvesting aspect. And so this one's going to be a little bit different in that regard, since what I'm trying to get across here is just what our garden looks like right now and what all we have growing in here. So I'm not actually going to be doing any harvesting, as difficult as that might be for me not to do. But I want to show you just the expanse of what is still growing and what we have to look forward to. And, you know, I saw one of our friends, Dan at Dan's Permaculture Food Forest, just posted on Instagram a picture of some of his okra blossoms, and he was talking about how beautiful they are. You are not kidding. It's one of my favorite little flowers in here because I know what having these attached to your plants actually means for future growth. And I'll also say that this year's garden has definitely been more intentional in terms of flowers. These are some hardy mums that survived over the last winter, and I'm going to put my hand beside this one so you can see just how massive this is. This hardy mum survived the winter, and it's just now getting ready to open up. Look at all of the blooms on here. Looks like it's going to be a kind of a purple pink blossom. Now, we've worked really hard this year to increase the number of pollinators in our garden, and you can see that the flowers that we started here on the other side away from our front yard space, those are still going strong, as beautiful as ever. In fact, I think they may be more vibrant now than they were even a month ago. And our front yard space is absolutely packed with vegetables right now, some of them doing really well, like our sweet potatoes here, and some like this cauliflower, which has still not started to develop a head. And I think that's a part of a fertilization issue that we have to figure out for these. I mean, they look good, they look healthy, but we still don't have any heads forming on these. And these are kind of a unique variety, a couple of different colors that we'd have in here. And so we really want to see the formation of, well, something else other than the leaves that we can come in here and enjoy. Now, the leaves are perfectly edible, but that is something that we need to figure out. Right behind that cauliflower, we have some Brussels sprouts, and you'll see Brussels sprouts in a couple of places in our garden. One thing I'll say about the ones out front here, though, is they didn't get all that tall. However, they are definitely producing some nice sprouts on them. In addition to that, we still have some of our basil growing strong. You can see it's going to seed here, but we've been pulling basil off for quite a while. This is the one actually that I trimmed way back earlier in the season. And we have some tomatoes, which are still producing some blossoms on here. Now, how long that's going to last, given the fact that our weather is probably going to shift soon, I'm not sure. Now, down here we have a couple of our fall vegetables that we planted about 5 weeks ago, or transplanted about 5 weeks ago. And you can see there is definitely some insect damage happening to some of these, but this is not the first planting of these vegetables. In fact, this is the third planting, because right after I put these in the ground the first time, I'd say within a matter of hours, rabbits came and gnawed them down all the way to the base, which is kind of interesting because earlier in the spring, the rabbits didn't mess with these whatsoever, anything that we had planted out here in the front garden. So I had to come back, replant. I added these metal pieces, and then I had to add a floating row cover to protect them. And now that they've gotten a little bit bigger, like this kohlrabi here, the rabbits are leaving them alone. So it looks like the weather should be okay to allow these to continue to develop. And they're at a stage now where I think we're going to get at least another inch or two in diameter pretty quickly now that the weather is turning. We still have a couple of the last peppers out here. You know, I did a major pepper harvest not too long ago. Some of these peppers to bring inside to use for storage. And again, we still have some right out here on the vine, so that's a good thing. Those are definitely more susceptible to the colder weather if we should get any of that in the near future. But these Brussels sprouts, which came back, these are second-year plants. These look like they're going to be absolutely delicious. Well, I'm going to walk from that spot there in our front garden space and start heading down this side path. The side path where we have a kohlrabi that we could definitely harvest now. One that's a little bit bigger. Look at the size of this kohlrabi. That is just massive. The top part here still nice and green, so this one shouldn't be woody. This is a variety called the super schmelz, which is supposed to be a giant kohlrabi. They say they can get up to 10 pounds. Look how healthy this kale is growing right here in our hay, even with these little guys on there. You know what this is? Well, if you've ever grown kale or cabbage or anything like that, you've probably seen these little loopers before. I don't care for these at all. They do come in there, and that's where a lot of that damage to your greens comes from. So I'm going to remove this one. But take a look at this other kale. It is massive, it's expansive, and it's actually also, even though it's kind of hard to tell, it's growing out of this hay bale. Let's look. There's the root portion of it going right into this hay bale right here. And it is really just lovely. You know, this time of year, this is one of those vegetables that we have to get inside and really start to preserve. There's so much kale out here. So that's one of the benefits of growing kale. That's going to last us, I would say, up through December at least. Now, one of the things that's really frustrated me over the winters is that I haven't done a very good job of protecting some of our fruit trees. The rabbits absolutely love gnawing at the bark and trying their best to kill the trees that we have out here. So these apple trees, so it's really impressed me that these apple trees, these columnar apple trees, have made their way back so well. You can see the remains here. Let me move this aside. You can see the remains of the old limbs on here and just how devastated they were. But look at all this new growth that's happened all season long. Now, if I can protect this better, along with the other columnar apple tree right here, if I can protect this better this season, we're going to be in so much better shape than we were to start this season out this year. So if you have some suggestions for a good way to protect these and really all of our fruit trees and our grapes, I've done the protective wrap around the base, but when you get 8 or 12 inches of snow, the rabbits stand right on top of that and they come in and they decimate anyway. I mean, with our grapevines this year, we did a video where we tried to make a good thing out of a bad thing, where we made some grapevine wreaths out of what was left after the rabbits came and chewed off all of these grapevines at the base. And you can see how much growth we got back this season because grapevines really are prolific. All of these grapevines had been destroyed. All the ones that you see even farther down here, they were all really just gnawed off. But it's so hard to find a good solution to wrap around all of these to protect them the way they need to be protected from the rabbits. So if you have experience with something that has worked for you, we would love to hear about it because we want fantastic grape production next season and not just the limited bunches that we got this year because it had to start over. Yes, we will be trimming this back, but not the way those rabbits did. That made it a very difficult start to the year, to say the least. Now we're in this side garden area here. This is the left side of our house, and we are growing, as you can see, some grapes here. Now the grapes are starting to die back, and again, we didn't get very much production at all from our grapes this year, but I think if I can find a way to protect them, we'll do a lot better next season. In our side garden here, this is a 32-foot by about 3-foot side garden right here. This year, we didn't focus on potatoes except for the ones that volunteered to come up. Instead, we put in our trellising and we've grown, well, You can see them right here. Winter squash galore. These are our Canada crookneck squash. You can see there's still a little bit of green happening here, and some of them are still trying to grow this late in the season. And I think one of the reasons they're trying to grow is because of what we did to cover up some of the nodes to allow them to grow a little bit longer. And so we have lots of this winter squash growing, which is our main focus in this bed this year. But it's not actually the only focus that we had. Well, here you can see our kabocha squash. Take a look at this. That is a beautiful sight. Look at that dark green color. I absolutely love the taste of kabocha squash. Maybe one of my favorites. You can actually see the vine here has died back mostly, so this one could come off. But again, this isn't a harvest video. This is just showing you what's still growing out here, like our delicata winter squash. There have been a couple people who said to me that this was their favorite variety. I'd like to know which of the winter squash you like the best. And now I'm on the other side of that same bed, because where we had tried to grow corn earlier this season, we've now replaced that whole area with some of our fall hardy vegetables like our kohlrabi. And you can see actually this broccoli here, I think needs a little bit of help, but it's trying to form a head at a very young age here. So you can see a little bit of yellowness in here, but we have broccoli, we have cabbage in here, and we have our kohlrabi. So all of this should still have time, I think, because of the types of plants they are, to still develop and provide us with another crop. And here's a look from the other end, and I'm giving you this look because what we have right in front of me now is our volunteer black cherry tomato. I keep focusing in on this plant in our videos primarily because of how much I enjoy the fruit, but also how plentiful these black cherry tomatoes have been for us from a volunteer plant. You know, sometimes it doesn't hurt to let a volunteer grow, and you can see, again, we're early October, Zone 5, Wisconsin, and this one is lush, and it shows no signs of stopping. Now, as I come up here on our backyard in space, you can probably hear some music in the background, and that's just a fall festival happening about a mile from our house, but the wind is still, and there is the sounds of that music floating across. Kind of adds a neat environment out here. Now you can see here in the corner we have some asparagus that we let go to seed. It's amazing how tall this gets if you let it. We'll be mowing this back before too long, just cutting it down for the winter. And in here we also have, well, right here, one of our yellow cauliflower. Take a look at this beauty. This is supposed to be yellow. That is an awesome looking color. It's not a white cauliflower like a lot of the other ones we've grown. It's supposed to be that color. So when we harvest it, I think you're going to really like that. In the background, we also have, as you can see, quite a few eggplants still growing strong. I would imagine that if I had to calculate it up, from the 10 or 12 plants that we planted this year, we've gotten well over 100 plus pounds of eggplant. So if that's something you enjoy, I think eggplant might be the way to go. It certainly was effective this year in Zone 5. You can see underneath here we also have some of our Brussels sprouts. They're not that huge yet, but we're hoping after trimming back the base of them, they've been aired out a little bit more than they were before, and we should still have time for them to bulk up a little bit more. I'm going to make one point about these cucumbers, and that's simply we still have cucumbers coming in October in Zone 5. Now, a good portion of the middle of our garden is just dedicated at this point to growing beans for seed. These pole beans here are just really not producing any more fresh or new beans. We're just going to allow these to stay on here and dry out as best we can. Now, as we get past that point, we're going to move down into more of our brassicas, and we do grow a lot of brassicas. They're really good in Zone 5. They last a long time. I've talked about that when I was looking at some of the other kale out front. But you can see these kale now are about 3 feet tall. I would say most of them are. Some of them are a little bit shorter, but that doesn't matter. The greens on here are excellent. Now, one thing we keep in mind when it comes to the plants that we decide to put in the ground, it's not just about the longevity of the plant, although that's very important to us, but it's also about whether or not we enjoy them. So down here, this is our celery. I don't really care for celery very much when it's from the store. I don't think it has much of a taste, but the celery that you grow at home has a completely different texture to it, a completely different taste, and it's amazing, for example, in our soups. It actually adds flavor instead of seeming kind of drab or plain. And so we want to not just take into consideration how long they're going to be out here and survive for us, we're looking at productivity and, of course, do we actually want to eat them? Now, this area used to have our onions in it, and it also had our rondenise squash. And now we've transformed that into cabbage, into some more kale, and also, can you tell what this is right here? This greenery just started popping up all over the place. Well, actually, I'll show you if you don't know. This is chamomile, and a couple of the flowers apparently spread enough, so now we have chamomile covering this area right here. We've used chamomile quite a bit this season, and I'll also show you in the back something else that's popped up from where we had one of our tomatoes earlier that I pulled out. There are probably 25, maybe 30 or more tomato plants volunteering up. You can see one of the things that I've said in previous videos is that if you plant tomatoes one time, you'll likely have them for life. Well, apparently the same can be said for this chamomile. Now, to give you a little perspective, here's the main garden I was just looking at, and right across the path here, about 5.5 feet away or so, we have our shade garden, or one of our shade gardens, which run along the back side of our house. Now, this area typically gets between 6 or 7 hours of sun every day, but you can see in here we have, these are our color greens right down in here. But what we found to be the most successful so far in this shade garden, at least in this spot, is our kohlrabi. Now, some of you might think you plant an awful lot of kohlrabi, and that is definitely true. Ever since we grew kohlrabi for the first time last year, we have been obsessed with trying to grow more of it. It's just such a versatile plant that we can't really get enough. Here we have our raspberry bushes. These are a fall-bearing golden raspberry. A lot of people asked about this last time around, like where we got these. We actually got this from a place called Jung's, and it is a fall-bearing raspberry, which means that now's the time, and actually for the last 2 weeks or so, where we've been getting our second harvest off of here. And right on the other side of this, we have the rest of this shade garden. Here you can see the color greens I was talking about earlier that we have in here. Look how healthy these are. They don't mind the shade one bit. And then we have more of our kohlrabi. This was intentionally meant to be our kohlrabi area, or one of our main kohlrabi areas. And there's another color green there. Now, you might not be able to see this one so well, but right back here is a cucumber plant that is growing all the way over into our heritage red raspberries. And why I'm pointing this out, if we come out to the edge of it, we've got a cucumber growing all the way out here. The plant itself looks like it's mainly died back, and yet we still have a really nice healthy cucumber. Well, I've shown you the main garden, and I've shown you the shade garden on the opposite side of the main garden, and now I'm back here in our hay bales. And really, we do have a couple of hay bales open right now where there's nothing in them, but we also have quite a few where we're still growing. We have a kohlrabi in this bale, and we also have some sweet potato. Take a look at that beautiful flower. It's one of my favorite flowers for many reasons. One, because, well, it's a sweet potato flower, and two, it's just so beautiful. If you like morning glories, you might try growing some decorative or ornamental sweet potatoes, because you get these really nice flowers and this lush greenery. And beside that, we still have some of our lima beans. Now, the lima beans are really interesting to me. They started forming the pods a little later than our bush beans, and they're still producing. And this is only the second time that we've tried to grow these lima beans, so we weren't really sure what to expect in terms of the longevity. Here we have another one of our eggplant. I wasn't kidding when I said these are still producing well, and that we've got so much from them. There you go. There's another one right underneath there. Multiple in here. And as we walk down the hay bale garden here, you can see more and more of the sweet potatoes, again, still flowering. We're hoping to have another week plus, just as much time as we can give them as possible to keep developing. There's one of our volunteer tomatoes that came up, growing the whole way down here. And then we get down here to our carrots. And these carrots growing in hay bales, it's not a harvest. It's not a harvest. I got to remind myself that. But they look really nice. Not the biggest carrot out there, but carrots growing in hay bales. Really, we found this season that there weren't a lot of limits to what we could grow in these hay bales. I'm back up on the other side of our heritage red raspberries, these fall bearing berries, to show you the rest of our shade garden. Now down in here we have some carrots. I harvested a couple the other day. They're looking really nice in here. And then we have our pole beans, which much like the other pole beans, they still have, you know, a few fresh beans on them, but most of the beans now are going to, whatever is left, are going to go toward creating seeds. And this is our black raspberry, which has a lot of lush primocane, which means, because this is a summer bearing raspberry, that next season, as long as we take care of these, protect them from the rabbits eating them, we are going to have a ton of fruit on the floricanes. Now the last of our shade gardens, I think, looks like a giant green jungle, just an absolute mass of green foliage. And the thing I want to point out with this is that, you know, we talk a lot about what can grow where in the garden, what's the best place to grow things. Well, I can say that everything we've got growing in here, from our celery to our basil to tomatoes, we have some more of our black raspberries here, to our kohlrabi. Look at the size of that kohlrabi. To green beans. We've got beans up here. We've got really nice tomatoes here again. And our kale here. All of this really is doing just as well, if not better, than other places with more sun. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have an area that seems to be shaded out and you're worried that something might not grow there, give it a try and see what happens, and you might be surprised with the results. Now this might be one of my favorite looking areas of our garden right now. These blue containers is where we took our purple Magic Molly potatoes from, and then we added, right after that, we went right into succession planting with some of our cabbage. This is our purple cabbage. Just take a look at what's happening. We've already got some of the heads of the cabbage forming. That's why it pays to have something ready to go in the ground, or in this case, into the container, right after you have harvested whatever it is that you're going, in our case, potatoes. Take a look at our chard. This chard is absolutely huge. These leaves are lush. We've got some broccoli coming in down here. All of this growing so quickly, especially now that the weather is starting to cool off just a little bit. And in the small raised beds where we had our beets earlier in the season, we have some Swiss chard and spinach. And in our other bed, we have some multi-sown beets. Let's see if you can see down in here. Yep, there you go. You can start to see the bulbs of these. Oh, this was a golden one right there. So you can see the bulbs of these starting to pop out of the soil. The greens are perfect if you want to harvest them right now. And in the bed where we harvested our carrots earlier in the season, we have added in our broccoli, and you can see the size of the head here. Let me put my hand for comparison. This is bigger than my hand, the head of broccoli here. This is a Waltham broccoli, and every single one of the plants that we transplanted over here now has a head growing on it, which is really exciting. And the pepper plant, which wasn't doing much while it was in here with the carrots, is now producing lots and lots of peppers still, and of course, more eggplant. Well, now I'm on the far side of our property, and behind me, you should be able to see some of these tomatoes that are still going strong. In fact, if you look closely, you should be able to see a ton of fruit still in here that we need to get to. A lot of this garden candy, get in here and get it harvested. But again, these plants show no sign of slowing down. The only thing they show signs of doing is growing more tomatoes. And maybe that's because we are right beside our compost garden. And I think that's actually been helping a little bit, but it's also, again, been all of that really nice weather. And within our compost garden, we still have some of our celery. We have peppers growing in here still, and still producing. And for the first time in 4 or 5 months, you can actually see one of the containers. You can see the surface, and that's because we finally had to get rid of the zucchini that had given us more zucchini, I think, than any other plant we've ever grown. But we still have peppers, we still have eggplants in here, and now we'll be able to add some of our composting materials into these as we prep for next season. I'm trying to find a way to show you this sweet potato bed that can really give you an idea as to how much sweet potatoes spread. This is a 2x6 bed. Maybe this is a better angle all around, but you can see these sweet potatoes just spread out. The greens are all well spread. I know a lot of people have talked about eating the sweet potato greens, and I do know they are delicious, similar I think to spinach, but I'm wondering what your experience has been when it comes to the greens. But that bed is not even our biggest bed. This is our 6x6 keyhole bed, and we have 3 varieties growing in here. You can see the size. Actually, one of our leaves here, take a look at the size of these leaves in here. I'm really hopeful for the harvest in here. We're going to wait as long as we can wait to get them out of here, but we really hope the production in here of these sweet potatoes, all these different varieties, is going to be fantastic, especially if you're part of Team Sweet Potato. Here we have some of our potatoes which we haven't yet harvested. These are late season potatoes. Most of them here are russet potatoes. These are potatoes that we're going to harvest here before too long, but there's still plenty of green life left in them. Now this brings us to the garage side of our house, where we have our long and thin raised beds. These are beds that we built last year, and we also have our patio garden. Now a lot of things in the patio garden were summer vegetables like our summer squash, and they've just recently been removed, but you can see we do have still in here some tomatoes that are still growing, and even a pepper plant that's still producing, and of course some peppermint, and we only grow that in containers because we don't want it to spread all over the place. In our long raised bed, we have some butternut squash. Now this is the only place on the property where we grew butternut squash this year, but we do have quite a few here. And if you didn't see our video where we harvested butternut squash from our community garden, our allotment, well, we have over 100 pounds of squash from there alone as well. Now in here we did add some more of our broccoli that we had started from seed and just transplanted it in. We also in a couple spots added some more Swiss chard. And then in the background along the edge here, I think you should be able to see we have some more peas growing. They were so good at the beginning of the season, and with this cool weather they should just be taking off and really producing well in no time. Now on the second long bed, we also have some more of that broccoli. Well, here you go. You can see this one's trying to put on a head as well. Some more of that chard and our delicata squash. This one's probably 8 or 10 inches long. We have multiple of these. I think when we go ahead and do that harvest, it's going to be fantastic. As we move past our peppers down to some more kale, we come to an end almost of our tour. And I say almost because what tour would be complete without a plant that I have been gushing over all season long, this California Wonder bell pepper plant, which is still producing ripe peppers. I really can't get over just how much we've gotten from this one pepper plant that has really encouraged us to overwinter again in the future. It's just a magnificent plant, a wonderful experience this year. Now this was a bit of a longer tour, but there were a couple of plants that I selectively left out of the tour, but we have tons of great content coming, and we hope along the way you found some inspiration for your upcoming vegetable gardens. Well, we have lots more to do out here today, so without further ado, I'm going to wish you all good day. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.